Welcome to hivio. In this weird East Village location, here we gather. I'm Mark Ramsey, your co-host for the event. The other co-host is Jamie Solis, and Jamie is? Jamie is not in the room. There he is in the back. We're thrilled to have you here. Thanks for taking your valuable time to be here with us. Let me talk about what this event is and is not. Okay, it's not a sales event. It's not a how to sell better what you have event. It's not a group heads doing deals in hotel room event. It's not a talking head saying the same thing to the same people event. This is an ideas festival, an unconference. So the notion here, surprise, surprise, most ideas live outside of the radio industry. I know that's a shock. So the intention here is to gather a group of people who have, in some cases, a little bit, in other cases, nothing whatsoever to do with radio, with ideas and tools and notions and concepts that can make a difference in the radio space. That's why we're here today and what we're here to do. So let's begin with a premise, okay? A popular premise for all, the notion that radio listening hasn't changed. You saw last week from Arbitron, they released the numbers, the radar numbers that said another 400,000 people listen to radio, 90-something% of everybody listens to the radio. Time spent listening hasn't changed one iota in the past year. Is that true? I mean, does that resonate with you? Does that resonate with you in terms of your own behaviors with radio over the years? Does that resonate with you in terms of the behaviors of the people you work with, the people you know, your family? Do your kids use the radio the same way you did when you were their age? That would assume that radio is unlike every other major mass medium. That would assume that radio is, in some meaningful way, special. Is radio special? And what does it mean if it isn't? If radio is special, it's not like newspapers. These are the newspaper numbers over time. That second line from the top is total weekday circulation. It goes from over 60 million to just over 40 million in the space of about 12 years. Down. Okay, now people consume more news than ever before. They just don't happen to consume it in newspapers. Radio is not like that. Radio is special. Radio is also not like the evening news. The evening news on the networks. The ratings from 1980 to 2012 from about 14 down to about 5. Now, people consume more news than ever before, more video news than ever before. They just don't consume it on network news broadcasts. But radio is not like that. Radio is special. Radio is also special compared to primetime television. Primetime commercial ratings. This is from the first quarter of 2013. Fell 8% across the board. That's the 6th straight quarter of total TV declines and the steepest drop since the 3rd quarter of 2009. Down, down, down. Now, people are watching more primetime television than ever before. They just don't happen to be watching it on television. So, is radio special? In order to answer that question, we need to go back to 1983. You remember 1983? Just for those of you keeping score, that was 30 years ago. 1983, the year that this movie was in the theaters, Risky Business, Tom Cruise in his underwear. It's the year that this man released Thriller, the best-selling album of all time. It's the year that this man was conceived. I don't mean we conceived of him, you understand. It's the year that this movie, Valley Girl, was also in the theater. Valley Girl, starring a very young, fresh-faced actor named Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage, who was the kid from the wrong side of the tracks dating the Valley Girl, Deborah Foreman. They're driving through Hollywood at night in one scene in the movie. It's very sketchy out there. There's a girl in the back seat, and she says, "If you stop this car, I'm not getting out." And Nick turns to her and says, "Fine, if they attack the car, save the radio." That was 1983. Would you see that line in a movie today? These are some statistics you probably have not seen. These are Arbitron statistics. These are average quarter hour ratings, i.e. the fraction of the population listening to radio right now. Over the years from 1980 to the present. You're looking at a decline that's pretty steady over that time. What's the peak number? It's 18.2. What year is that? 1983. The peak number of average quarter hour for rating. Been going down since. Now, the last few years, that's a PPM influence, obviously, so there's some squirreliness with the data, but it doesn't matter because the trend is solid prior to that time. Declining average quarter hour rating. Wait a minute, I thought radio was special, but that's not all. This, by the way, is compiled by the Radio Research Consortium, the organization that aggregates data for public radio broadcasters, but this is not public radio data. This is general radio data. Here's another picture, and this one I know you haven't seen because this is barely public information, again from the Radio Research Consortium. These are PPM markets, persons using measured media. Metro average, person 6+, Monday through Friday, 5A to 1A. These are over 3 years, 2010 on top, 2011 in the middle, 2012 on the bottom. The bottom line of this picture is that between 2010 and 2012, average quarter-hour ratings for radio declined by 9%. Let me repeat that. Between 2010 and 2012, average quarter-hour ratings for radio declined by 9%. So what am I saying here? Am I saying radio is dead? No, not by a long shot. Of course not. Radio works. Radio is effective. Radio works for consumers. Radio works for advertisers. You know that. I know that. We all know that. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is maybe radio isn't special. And isn't that okay if radio isn't special? Isn't that okay if we understand that radio functions like every other mass medium under the sun, that radio is subject to the same trends, the same cosmic trends that affect television, that affect film, that affect music, these same cosmic trends? Why in the world would we be immune? Here's why it's important. If you're going to make plans for the future, for your brands, for your industry, which is better, to make them on the basis of myths or to make them on the basis of reality? Under which scenario can you make better plans, better decisions, and do smarter things? In which case can you create a better future for radio? The challenge for radio, and it's the challenge for all media, it's the crisis of attention, right? Attention's not exposure. Exposure is, I've got the PPM device on my hip, and I walk by a radio signal, and it hears the signal I don't, and that counts as listening. When it hears what I don't, that's called listening. That's different from attention. Attention is granted. Attention is given, right? Attention is something I give to you because you earn it, you deserve it, because I care, because I'm interested, because I'm passionate. That's attention. That's the crisis. How do we solve that problem? How do we turn around that attention problem? There are ways, and that's what this day is about. And the two ways are unique and compelling content and platforms. Platforms, namely, the places where attention lives now, where you can place that unique and compelling content in a variety of forms and shapes and sizes, depending on where I, the consumer, am. Because it's about me, it's not about you anymore. Now, unique and compelling content. Let me take a step back and explain this a little bit. And I want to do it with the infamous milkshake story. If you're familiar with Clay Christensen at Harvard, you may have heard this story. Some of you have even heard it. Some of you have heard it from me. So, fast food outfit wanted increased milkshake sales. They tried everything. They messed with the formula. They messed with the size. They messed with the flavoring. They messed with the color. They messed with everything. Nothing worked. What do? The solution to the problem was they had someone, a research scientist, sat in the place all day long, from morning to noon to afternoon to night, and watched. And what did he see? He saw that in the morning, the people buying the milkshakes were largely male, and they were buying them for a particular reason. They were buying them because they wanted a breakfast substitute. They wanted something that could fit in their hand, last a long time, be a breakfast substitute, last the duration of their commute, whatever it was. That's why they were buying it. That's the job they were buying the milkshake for. Funny thing was, later in the afternoon, they discovered it was largely the same men, the same people, the same guys coming back to the fast food joint for more milkshakes. But this time, they were there with families. They were there with kids. And they did not want to spend very long. They wanted something quick. They wanted something fast. They wanted something that enabled them to get out of there. In other words, the exact same customer, the exact same consumer, was buying the same thing for two different jobs at two different times of the day. The same thing for two different jobs. So I thought, well, how do we relate that to radio? Think of just conventional radio. What are the jobs people hire a radio brand for? And I came up with 14. And this is the first time I've publicly displayed any of this. 14 jobs. 14 things consumers hire radio brands to do. And I'm going to go through these very quickly. The thing about this is two things. One is, these are not mutually exclusive. Okay? Rarely do I hire a radio brand just for one thing. Chances are I hire them for an assortment of these things at once. And the more things I hire you for, the more defensible your brand and the more potent your brand. The more powerful your brand. The more jobs you fulfill in my life. The other thing is, some of these jobs are more defensible than others. Some of them are more easily substitutable than others. Some of them are more vulnerable than others. And the more you're loaded up on vulnerable jobs, the more vulnerable your brand becomes. The more you're loaded up on defensible jobs, the more potent and powerful your brand becomes. So here we go. I'm going to share these with you in what is my opinion is most vulnerable to least vulnerable. Okay? Starting with favorite music, job number 1. Okay, we all know you get that from the radio, your favorite music. There are about a zillion ways to get that nowadays. That is highly vulnerable to any potential substitute. Soundtrack. I just want something to be on the background while I go about the rest of my day. That's all I want. Again, highly vulnerable to a lot of alternatives. A little bit less vulnerable, entertainment. Now, I can get entertainment from the radio, sure. I can get entertainment from Netflix, from Hulu, from Kindle, from a variety of different places and podcasts in addition. So it is fairly vulnerable if that were my only job. Now, this is the idea that when you listen to the radio, there's a sense of immediacy, right? It's the difference between watching live TV and watching your DVR. How many people choose to watch live TV rather than watch the thing you actually cared enough to record on your DVR? That's the idea of immediacy, right? That is not as easy to duplicate as some of these other jobs. Inform and educate. It is fairly substitutable, right? There are a ton of ways to be informed and educated nowadays. New ways online, new ways offline, new ways all over the place that didn't exist just a few years ago. So yes, it's highly substitutable and vulnerable, but here's the exception. If you get really deep into the job. So the deeper you get into this, like say ESPN, like say NPR, the more defensible it becomes. So either go whole hog or don't go at all, because the more shallow you are, the more vulnerable you are. Changing your mood. I want to get up. I want to relax. These are valid jobs you hire a radio brand for, right? Fairly substitutable still. Discovery. I want to hear something I haven't heard before. My goodness, if there are a lot of ways to do this now, and thanks to Apple, there's one more. Now, here's where it starts getting interesting, because now we get into attributes that are only partially substitutable, attributes that are actually fairly defensible. Culture immersion. We don't give enough credit to this in radio. But if you listen to a really well-executed country station, right, with personalities and stuff going on, a really well-executed sports station, a really well-executed news station, a really well-executed urban station, you are part of a larger culture, right? That aspect is really important. That is not so easily duplicated. You know, we're going to have Tom up here from Pandora later. Ask him if he can duplicate that. Companionship. Even though I'm alone in my car, when I hear a voice on the radio, it's like they're in the car next to me, right? There's a personal, intimate connection. That is not so easily duplicated. That's an advantage of the medium. Easy convenience. Yes, I'm familiar with it. There are 5 radios in my household. There are 800 million in the US. I know how to use it. Everybody knows how to use it. It's part of my habit. Habits are really hard to break. So this is in the category of moderately defensible. That said, habits don't last forever. Local. Yep, I can find out what's around my neighborhood, right? That's a great advantage. That is also the main place where digital is evolving right now, as Chad knows, wherever he is. So this is going to be increasingly competitive down the road. And I would also argue that the folks at Craigslist know more about what's going on in your community than your promotions manager does. Belonging. This is the idea that even when I listen just by myself, I know I'm part of a larger community of people listening. This is huge in Christian radio, for example. This is huge in public radio. I know I'm part of a larger community by my participation in this consumption. This is not that easy to duplicate, right? This is actually quite hard to duplicate. Betterness. This is the idea that everything a brand does is designed to make my life better in some meaningful way. We're going to have Samantha from Uber up here in a few minutes. If there's ever an app that's designed for betterness, my goodness, that is it. That's made my life infinitely better. This is not trivial. This is where the digital revolution is taking us, towards a place where people can get things that make their lives better. So the question is, not just giving people a chance to win contests, which is really an offense to anyone who loses, but the idea that what are we doing as a brand to make my life better in the real world, my life, not some generic life around me. And then finally, and least vulnerable of all, most defensible of all, is this idea of star access. This is the idea of either stars or exclusive content that is highly desirable. In either case, you're talking about exclusives to the brand. If I want Howard Stern, I can only get it from SiriusXM. That's where I'm going to go. That's a big deal. That is a huge roadblock. We have to ask why more stations aren't moving in that direction. All right, so here's my little formula. I took all those 14 jobs, and I just put them top to bottom, where at the top is the stuff that's most defensible, at the bottom is the stuff that's least defensible, and you can rate your own brand from low to high and see where it scores on that matrix. I did that exercise for my client WMMR, Bill Weston. He did this, he self-rated WMMR. Now MMR, as many people in the room know, is a legendary rock station. These are his scores for his brand. Note the amount of color in the upper right-hand corner. That is a highly defensible brand, even in this day and age and going forward. This is what we need to strive for the future of radio. This is what exclusive and compelling content's all about. Now, you might say, well, but audiences know we do that, right? That's what it's all about. That's what we're here for. It's taken for granted that we provide this to audiences. This was what we do every day. Well, is that their opinion? Let's ask them. I did. I asked a sample of 1,000 folks from the US 12 plus, this question. Do you agree or not? Radio brands create unique and compelling content. Agree or disagree? And this is their answer. Disagree outnumbers agree by more than 3 to 1. So they're telling us we don't do this. And yet, as I've just shown you, this is the primary opportunity for us going forward to develop exclusive and unique content. Maybe this is the reason why folks like Mark Maron go from the ashes of Air America to the most popular comedy podcast in America, to what radio brand? The answer is none. The answer is none. He's on IFC. He's on cable TV. So the most popular audio podcast for comedy in America, let me stress that, goes to what radio brand? The answer is none. That explains why Kevin Smith, director Kevin Smith, Clerks, Chasing Amy, Jay and Silent Bob, with some of the most popular audio comedy podcasts in America, he's on what radio brand? He's on none. Kevin Smith, who told me personally flat out these words, Mark, I would love to be on the radio, is on Hulu and AMC, internet and cable. The answers for our industry are right in front of our eyes and right in front of our ears, but we refuse to see it and we refuse to hear it. So again, unique and compelling content and the platforms on which that content can live and thrive in a variety of different forms, shapes, and colors. So what does that mean? That means that you, all of you, are in the content making business. You, all of you, are in the platform distribution business. You, all of you, better not be in the tower business. So again, if you've got tons of great content, great quality content, your obligation is to spread it out across as many platforms as you can in as many shapes and forms as we, the audience, desires. And if you're, say, selling, somebody else's movies and video, somebody else's TV, somebody else's content, maybe you should consider making your own unique and compelling content, because maybe, just maybe, it'll increase the engagement with your audience, it'll increase the fanship from that audience, maybe, just maybe, it'll even receive some critical acclaim and, who knows, some awards. Because the thing about content, compelling and unique content, is that what makes it worthwhile is its very scarcity, its very difficulty, okay? It's hard, okay? But it's time in this radio industry of ours to stop saying, where did that work? And start saying, why not here now? And with that, here we go with hivio. Thank you.